Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. Today isn't going to be a super long video, but I do want to make this because it's about something that I've been considering ever since we got the announcement about Year 9 Season 4. For Honor's lore is in a precarious state right now. There's no question that it has evolved and changed constantly, and sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse, but it has unquestionably been a bit of a ride. And right now, though, we are at the cusp of a ledge that the writers have to manage very carefully. In this video, I briefly want to explain how we got to this point, why this is a very delicate position to be in, and what are some directions the writers could take. So, let's start at the beginning. For Honor, at its core, has always been a fighting game centered around the main factions of Knights, Samurai, Vikings, and later Wulin and others. They are the core of the game's setup. If someone were to ask you to explain For Honor in just one sentence, the best way to do it would be to say, it's a fighting game where you play as Knights, Samurai, Vikings, and an assortment of other medieval warriors and fight for dominion. This is the fundamental concept of For Honor. However, evolving narratives require more than just a mere concept. You need motivations, you need goals, you need stakes. What do the warriors want? Why do they want it? How are they going to get it? What is the cost of failure and what is the prize of success? And this is why, after Year 2, the writers knew that For Honor needed to evolve past just four factions fight for dominion, because, well, that isn't an evolving narrative. So in Year 4, we are introduced to the Covenants, the two main factions that will spearhead the future of For Honor's lore. You have the Order of Horkos, which is an order who align with the ideals of Apollyon, the villain of the campaign. With Astrea at their head, they seek to conquer Heathmore and impose the ideology of might makes right, and the strong rule the weak and the weak serve the strong. To counter them is the Chimera Alliance, a collective of freedom fighters who stand opposed to Astrea and Horkos, who believe peace is attainable through mutual cooperation, camaraderie, and justice. Now, whether you like these two factions or hate them, at least we can understand this. The For Honor writers knew that they needed to change the stakes a little bit. Now, could they have done it with the factions as they were? Yes, they could have, but this was an option they chose to take, and it did get the job done. It was a step in the right direction. The setting needed new motivations, new stakes, new goals, and these two sides could provide it. They have dedicated seasons. They could have heroic individuals in battles. You could have new maps that could arise from their conflict, new methods of waging war. You could even alter the faction war map to replicate certain things going on in the setting. And that's what I was kind of expecting. And to a certain extent, we see some of this play out as many of the new heroes added to the game, like Varangian Guard, Astrea, Ocelot, and Hatun, were all added as a result of Horkos' actions. So it was a good idea. From these covenants, we could see new things happen. But the writers made a critical error, and it hurt the stakes of the lore in a big way. They forgot about Chimera. After Year 5, Chimera does almost nothing in the lore. Horkos is the only notable player in the war, and it is their actions that draw the Outlanders, the Varangians, and the ire of the Heathmore populace. This wouldn't be terrible if the presence of those enemies like Varangian or Ocelot bolstered Chimera, or at least created the illusion that Horkos was struggling, but it didn't. The lore never implies these actions had any impact on Horkos, and that damaged the stakes. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. Let's say you're walking through a snowy mountain range and you see a sign that says, "Quiet, Avalanche Zone." Now suddenly there's some tension. Your actions have consequences. Screaming or shouting could cause a catastrophe and shake up everything around you. But let's say while you're walking through those mountains, your baby starts crying and nothing happens. Weird. Didn't the sign say that you need to be quiet? Avalanches could happen? But all the way through the mountain, the baby cries, an explosion goes off, your phone rings, and a mariachi band falls from the sky. No avalanche. Not only are the stakes now ruined because there was no payoff, but you're left with a sense of confusion. What was the point of feeling tense if there was no threat? So let's take a look back at the setting. We've got Chimera, we've got Astrea, we've got Ocelot, we've got Varangian Guard. You'd think that with all those, you would think that Horkos would suffer something. That Chimera could get some kind of leg up. Sure, Astrea, Ocelot, Varangian, they don't have to join Chimera necessarily, but you'd think they'd at least give Chimera some breathing room so they could do things. Or at least you would expect them to bring in some new heroes, or some new maps, or some new things. But by Year 8, Season 4, we're told not only is Horkos unbothered by these new elements, they've almost completely won. They've almost taken all of Heathmore. They just need one more good push to do the deed. And this was disappointing for many, including myself. because everyone was asking the same question: where the hell is Chimera? This supposed faction feud you wanted to create between these two led nowhere. You placed the sign in front of the mountain, and we all braced ourselves for the payoff of Chimera and Horkos, but there was no payoff. And all of us were pretty disappointed. There was no payoff for this big warning. You gave us almost 2 years saying, just look at this, guys, we've got Horkos causing all these problems. We got Chimera rising up to fight them. We got so many great stories to tell here. You didn't tell any stories about Chimera. You told stories about Horkos causing trouble and bringing in new elements. Great. When is Chimera going to do things and bring in elements? Now, at this point, you all know what happens. Astrea is led into a trap by General Zhe with the help of the Hatoons. Astrea and Horkos are defeated. Then, over the next 2 seasons, we learn Astrea is imprisoned in the Colosseum to fight alongside Calliope indefinitely, and the Horkos treasure that Vortigern was guarding is now in the hands of either Coldheart or Ilaria. Now, if you're like me, you probably heard all that lore and thought, what? So just to be clear here, Chimera can't stop Horkos. The Varangians can't stop Horkos. The Ocelots can't stop Horkos. Aphira can't stop Horkos. They all can't unite somehow and even slow down Horkos. Horkos is set to take all of Heathmore without issue. But the Hatoons not only stop them, they overwhelm them after one battle. Now understand, capturing an enemy leader does make a big difference, for sure. But Horkos had such spanning influence. Remember, they established an Inquisition in Ashfeld, used agents all over Heathmore to gather information and intelligence, and they were so expansive, Chimera couldn't even act. If they had such widespread influence, no way the capture of Astrea alone should have done the trick. It at least should have allowed Chimera some mobility, something to do now. Like, think about it. If Horkos was going off to go deal with the Hatoons and lost, wouldn't that mean that for a brief period, Chimera could make moves and start bolstering defenses against Gul'jin? Something could happen that Chimera could do? But no. No, they didn't do anything. And people have been asking about this since season 1 of this year. Where is Chimera now? Horkos is down and out apparently, and Gul'jin has begun her campaign into Heathmore. Is this finally Chimera's time to shine? Are they going to stand up now and push back against Gul'jin? Are they going to pull a Hail Mary and maybe come to the aid of Horkos? Now, the writers told us just wait until season 4. In season 4, you'll see what's going on with Chimera. So we waited. And the news is out. Chimera is dead. Yeah, check out this little challenge bit that says Mourning Chimera. They're gone. And as Raph told us in the Warrior's Den, most of Chimera joined the Hatoons, and the few that didn't are now rallying to Prince Yi in their war against General Zhe.
Let me jump in on that. For a few TUs, we've been promising that we would be talking a bit about what has happened to Chimera. You know, last year we mentioned that Horkos was crushed, but we never really talked that much about Chimera. I always said, wait, it will come in the last season of the year. Well, last season of the year is now.
We're here, pay up now.
I guess. Basically, Chimera was on this group of freedom fighters fighting for a peace, but an idealized version of peace. They were on their last leg last year, after, with the Horkos rising and all of that. And when the Mongols came in, when Gul'jin came in, well, what do? Will they really fight against this terrifying new enemy? We can say, and you'll read in the Warriors, that they decided to have a meeting, and most of them decided to submit, to go with this not ideal peace, but some form of peace rather than fight. Some decided to resist, and those decided to hitch their wagon to Prince Yi, not because Yi is a Chimera, but his philosophy is close enough that they can see themselves resisting and with someone in which they can trust. So he's a good guy. He's an ideal leader, I guess.
Gotcha.
Chimera as an organization is gone. We don't know what's going on with Holden Cross. We don't know what's going on with Daubeny. Chimera is gone. We don't even have a lot of named characters in Chimera. Think about this. Horkos had Astrea, Vortigern, Ravier, Vela, Hulda, Sunda. But Chimera, who do we have? Holden Cross, Daubeny. I think that's it. Do you see how Chimera was basically ignored for several years and is now dead? Chimera's gone. Further, Horkos is neutered, and Astrea has shown no interest or intention of escaping and setting things right. So that leads us to the point we are in now. The covenants are now broken, and all the work done from year 4 up to 9 is now gone. So we are back to the question we had originally. Where can the narrative go from here? What are the stakes, the motivations, the goals? Is Gul'jin set to take all of Heathmore unopposed? If so, what does that mean for Heathmore? As you can see, we've made a bit of a blunder here with Chimera, but let's put that aside for just a second. Let's leave aside the Chimera issue. We are now back at square one, it seems. So what now? Well, there is still hope. There are ways we can fix this and make it work, but it's going to require some careful planning and direction. So let me take a moment and share a few ideas as to what they could potentially do. The first idea I can think of is an alliance. Have Holden Cross spring Astrea from her cell in the Colosseum and let the two form a temporary truce to deal with the common enemy. This could create some interesting conflict for at least a few seasons. Or you could go with a savior plan. Maybe it's a new Wulin hero coming or some other hero in the future, but give Gul'jin a foil she has to contend with. Release a hero or hero skin who can act as competition or at least a rival for Gul'jin so there can be new conflict for Heathmore to rush to and support. Hell, here's an idea. Bring back the Lord Warden as a totally new playable class like, say, a paladin for the Knights. That would give the Knights a new character, which they haven't had in years, and it would bring the Lord Warden back, and it could revive the conflict a bit. Third, another option, have a vacuum plan, a power vacuum plan. Have Gul'jin die or leave the setting. Remove her from the equation, and with this new power vacuum, you can see elements start to rise up and resist the Hatun and their allies, or internal struggles or squabbles. You could do things with that. But at the end of the day, what we face here is a problem. We had a unique setup of Knights, Vikings, Samurai, and Wulin fighting each other for domination. The development team knew they had to expand beyond just that and decided to give new stakes and new goals for the characters. They started this out well with the idea of Horkos and Chimera, but then blundered on Chimera, creating a singular, ostensible bad guy to twirl their mustaches and cause problems for everyone else, only to throw in a Hail Mary and have that bad guy get beaten in one battle by a brand new enemy, Gul'jin and the Hatuns, and now we're at a point where we're all kind of wondering, what happens now? There's one of two ways this can go. Well, three actually, but I'm scared of the third option. The first way is that we see a new force rise up to challenge Gul'jin and will create two new enemies to fight and recreate the conflict. Two, we just assume that Gul'jin is going to take Heathmore, and now everything in For Honor is going to be small stories within Heathmore. Like, for example, the story between Coldheart and Ilaria is not a world-spanning thing. It's a very small story within the setting of Heathmore, and maybe the goal of For Honor now is not to tell big, expansive stories anymore, but small, concise stories that can take up maybe a season or two. That's a possibility. And I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that as long as I can keep coming up with creative ideas. And hey, just saying, Ubisoft, I have ideas. I write stories about them, you know. The third way this could go, and that's what scares me, is the game kind of peters, narratively speaking. Now, here's the thing. Many people have told me not many people care about the lore. Many people say the lore isn't that important and it isn't necessary for a fighting game. I disagree about it being not necessary. Warriors need a reason to fight, you know, even in games like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Call of Duty. Usually you have a reason why you're picking up arms and fighting. For Honor's no different. Whether or not you care about the reason is your prerogative and your position, but as someone who cares about storytelling and writing, I care. So I pray that this isn't a sign that the narrative is starting to peter. I don't think it is. I want to believe that they have a plan because I've spoken to them before and they're very smart about how they handle their writing. In fact, we had long conversations about things that I can and can't say in my videos so that we can avoid potential problems in the future narratively and consistently. So I do think that they've got plans. I don't think that they're petering out. But if we don't see some of the ideas that I've implemented or suggested happen, either a new conflict rises up for all of Heathmore to be embroiled in, or we start seeing small scale involvements and conflicts that we can enjoy in terms of small stories, something's got to give. But I wanted to make this video to not be so negative. I don't want to be super negative right now. I know I probably sounded it, but my point is this. I wanted to point out what happened with Horkos and Chimera and why I think that kind of hurt a little bit, and why there are probably a lot of lore fans out there who are disappointed in how that was handled, and now we're just like, oh, well, Chimera's dead now, what next? And so that's why I'm making this video, to kind of exposit a little bit and also to ramble and rant a bit, because that's what I do. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say here. Not much else to this video. I just wanted to say this quick. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.